shape mask around them to isolate just them in the video scopes. I'm taking my time to avoid the eyes, lips, and anything else that could be a distraction in the video scopes. Now let's enable the highlight feature. And voila! We can now only see the skin tones in our scopes. Looking in the Luma waveform, the trace for the skin is mainly in the 30 to 60 IRE range. That's not bad considering he's in the shade, so I think we can improve the exposure a little, so we'll bring up the gamma a bit, which is primarily where the skin tones lie. Now for the hue, let's take a look at the vector scope. You can see his skin is a little on the red side compared to the flesh line. Now you might be thinking, we need to set a complex key qualifier and isolate the skin. But instead, I'm going to show you an even easier and faster way to fix the hue of the skin by going to the hue versus hue curve, and with the eyedropper tool, we'll isolate the hues of the skin by clicking on them, and then we'll drag the middle point down. This swings the trace until it lines up more evenly on the line. That's better, but what's still bothering me is I think that there's a lot of skin tones that are still leaning towards red. That's likely due to the redness in his nose. So to address that, we'll simply widen the range and move those red and magenta tones closer to the flesh line. Of course, people's skin tones are never even, and that's okay, but this method can make those imperfections less obvious, and you can kind of think of it like adding makeup to our talent, and that makes you a hero. Finally, for the saturation, I would say that the trace extends around 40% from the center of the vector scope, and if you remember, I said for pale complexions, they should be between 20 to 30%. So let's remove some of that extra color by going to the hue versus sat curve, placing a point on the skin with the eyedropper, and dragging down on the middle point to remove some of that color. All right, it's time to see the results. I'll disable the highlight feature, and then the window. And let's take a look at the before and after. You can see how dark and reddish his skin was, and now how they look much more pleasing and natural. Now for our next shot in Premiere Pro. We'll use an opacity mask to isolate this guy's skin. In terms of exposure, I would say we are pretty good from 30 to 70 IRE. But what we really need to work on is the hue of the skin, which we can see is leaning towards yellow in the vector scope. I oftentimes will see this when people are near a window and there is green grass or foliage on the outside that is tinting the skin towards green. So to correct for this, we'll use the hue versus hue curve. We'll isolate the skin tones with the eyedropper and drag the middle point up until the trace aligns better with the flesh line. In terms of saturation, we are around 30% from the center, which falls in the 25 to 40% range for dark skin tones, so we're good on the saturation. Now we'll disable the mask and take a look at the before and after. Beautiful. That's a huge improvement. Look how green the skin tones were before our correction. He was looking sickly, and now we've returned him to optimum health. So just remember that grass and foliage can tint our skin tones green. Next, let's jump